My mother-in-law was a warm, funny, amazing woman. She and my wife were incredibly close. Sadly, she passed away when our son was just 4 months old. Fast forward a few years, our son is 3 now. We're living in this old 1930s house in Pasadena. One evening, I was giving him a bath. He was sitting there, happily splashing around, when he suddenly started looking past me, behind me, like he saw something. First to one side, then the other. Then he asked, "Why does Grandma call Mummy that funny name?" I froze. At first, I thought he meant my mum, but then he repeated it more clearly. "Why does Grandma call Mummy that funny name?" And I just stared at him. It was a nickname, a silly, affectionate name my wife's mum used to call her when she was little. Something private, intimate, something we never said out loud, especially not around him. So I asked, "Where did you hear that?" He shrugged. "The farmer told me." "Who?" "The farmer. He's my friend." Later that night, I told my wife everything. She burst into tears from the memories and from the fact that our son couldn't possibly know that nickname. A few days later, I was working from home. My wife was at her retail job, and I heard our son talking in his room. It wasn't baby talk either. It was a conversation. Yes. No. I don't know. And then, laughter. I went into his room and asked who he was talking to. He said, "The farmer. We're playing." Every horror movie I'd ever seen came rushing back into my brain. I asked, panicking, "Where is he?" "Show me." And my son calmly replied, "He left when you came in." That night, I told my wife. She was just as shaken. We agreed, if it ever happened again, we'd do something. Anything. A few nights later, deep in the night, we heard our son speaking again. "Grandma says we can't be friends anymore." We rushed to his room. He was just sitting in bed. We asked if everything was okay, and he said it again. "Grandma says I'm not allowed to play with the farmer anymore." And that was it. He never mentioned the farmer again, ever. He's 13 now, and he remembers none of it. But we remember it all. When my brother and I were about 4 or 5, we lived in a house that was nearly 100 years old. One day, we were walking up the stairs and saw a tall man in a black coat and a top hat. He was heading into the living room, just to the left at the bottom of the staircase. We were scared, but we figured maybe Dad was playing a prank on us, so we called out to him. And that's when things got really creepy. Both Mom and Dad came out of the kitchen. The kitchen was on the other side of the house, completely separated from the living room. I hadn't thought about this in years. We never really talked about it. But about a month ago, my daughter suddenly asked me, "Dad, do you believe in ghosts?" I told her this story. And just seconds later, my phone rang. It was my brother. He said, "I was just talking to my partner about paranormal stuff. Do you remember the guy in the top hat?" Here's a terrifying story that actually happened to me. I was about 10 or 11 years old, and I used to stay up late all the time. That night, when I finally got into bed, I still felt uneasy. I wrapped myself in all my blankets and pressed my body against the wall. My double bed was right up against it. I lay there, wide awake, for maybe an hour, until I heard something, a sound, a quiet, muffled sobbing. I focused on it, hoping it was just my imagination, or that maybe I'd already fallen asleep. But after a few minutes, I decided to find out what it was. I turned over in bed and saw a woman in a dress standing at the far end of my room. She was crying, with her face buried in her hands. Her hair was tangled, her dress torn and shredded, and she was tall. Her head nearly touched the ceiling, which meant she had to be at least 8 feet tall. A few seconds passed. Then she looked right at me and screamed, but the scream sounded distant, as if it came from far away. She locked eyes with me, then turned around and walked through the wall. I didn't sleep at all that night. I must have been 6 or 7 years old, spending the night at my grandparents' house. I was lying on the couch, trying to fall asleep, when I heard a whisper. They had a photo on the living room wall, a picture of my aunt, and the whisper was coming from that photo. The picture was speaking in her exact voice. She asked me if I'd been behaving and told me typical auntie stories. It sounds creepy, but somehow I wasn't scared at all. One night, the aunt in the photo told me to wake up my grandpa. She said it was for something very important. So I did. But when he realized there was no one in the photo, he got mad and started yelling at me. In between his threats and insults, he suddenly noticed someone moving outside the window. He grabbed his gun and told me to stay in the room with Grandma. A minute or two later, we heard a gunshot. Turns out, there was a prison about 20 miles from their house. That night, 3 young men had killed a guard and escaped. They were scoping out my grandparents' place, planning to steal the truck and anything they could fit in it. But Grandpa saw them first. One of the guys ended up with a bullet in his shoulder. To this day, I have no idea why that damn photo was talking to me. They'd never had ghost experiences before, and never again after. But it was that photograph that saved all of us that night. I live in the north of Switzerland. We've got lots of old military bunkers here, left over from World War II. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, 3 friends and I decided to explore one of them. It was built on a hill in a small forest. The main door was jammed shut, so we had to take it apart ourselves. We found a huge log nearby and used it as a battering ram. After a lot of effort, the door finally gave way. There was a peephole on the door, about 4 inches wide. We opened it and shined our flashlight into the darkness. What we saw was a long, ruined corridor with rooms on both sides. We couldn't even see the end. It was too far away. We took turns looking inside until one of my friends said, "There's a small light at the end of the hallway." But when I looked, there was no light. I pushed him aside and took another look. What I saw made my skin crawl. There wasn't a small light. It looked more like a flashlight, pointed directly at me, and behind it was a human silhouette. I stepped back a few paces and said, "There's someone in there." And just then, someone, or something, knocked on the door from the inside. We panicked, screamed, ran. I was so scared I ran all the way home and locked the front door behind me. The next day at school, my friends and I talked it over. We figured some older kids must have been messing with us. But a week later, we went back to the bunker. This time, The door was completely welded shut, and the creepiest part, you could clearly see that it had been opened from the inside. We didn't say a word. We just turned around and left. There was only one entrance. No way someone could have opened it, then welded it shut again in secret. I still live in the same area, and 20 years later, I went back to that bunker. Everything looked exactly the same.